Hey everybody, Josh Sheridan here with the Barely Legal Podcast.
They demand my alter ego, but I won't go.
On today's show, we have Tim Cronin. He is a local musician, plays in a number of pretty amazing bands. We've been Facebook friends for quite some time. He kind of knows a lot of the players in the scene locally and has played with them in various incarnations of different bands. And we connected on Facebook, and I said, "Come on in here." And he made the drive today from Dade City or
Newport Richey.
Newport Richey.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So I wonder if Newport Richey people are offended by Dade City and vice versa.
Well, I mean, it's pretty much opposite ends of the county. So
it's true. And every time I have to drive to either one of them, I feel like I'm leaving the state. Which it's kind
Pasco is kind of its own little culture.
I was having this conversation. I think it was it with Owen Meats or something? We were talking about the Pasco music scene. That Pasco's kind of got its own little.
It does. It's got its own little microcosm of. And for a while, I was covering it. I used to do this blog for Newport Richey Patch, where I was trying to, at least on the West Pasco scene, cover as much ground as I could, because at the time there were a lot of bars having live music,
right?
And it was one of those things where. Unfortunately, even though there was still, social media and all that kind of stuff, there weren't enough people advertising what their live music was. And oftentimes what would happen is, like, you'd call a bar, ask who's playing this weekend, and, the bartenders would be like, "Oh, I don't know. I'd have to check with the manager." Or they'll say, like, "It doesn't matter. They all sound the same anyway."
So whoever happened upon you just by chance would be how you get people watching you. You couldn't find it on social media or any of these other things like you can today.
Some places were better than others.
Yeah.
Some places had, full calendars, either online or, they would print them out and you could go to the venue and, take it home or whatever. But it wasn't all encompassing. And I was like, that needs to change.
Right.
So I started doing that. And then about a year later, I joined up with gotonight.com and started working with them. And they list live music all over the Tampa Bay area.
Right.
So them having a Pasco representative helped them out. And I was able to, sort of, it was a very symbiotic relationship with them.
Right. Now, are you a Pasco person originally, or?
Well, I'm originally from Chicago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I moved down here in 2005 to get my feet wet in the scene around here.
Were you playing up in Chicago?
I only played one actual gig in Chicago. It was with an original band that I had joined up with a buddy of mine from college. And we played like unsigned band night at a place called the Elbow Room in Chicago.
What was the name of that band?
That was called Unintentional Status.
Unintentional Status.
Yeah, that was a name that my college friend Brian Tomry came up with.
All right. What type of music was that?
It was very much a straightforward, like bluesy, hard rock kind of sound, influenced by pretty much everyone you'd expect: Zeppelin, The Doors, bands like that.
Chicago's got a pretty intense music scene. I mean, obviously jazz goes back a ways
jazz,
there.
blues,
then,
yeah.
I'm a big Wilco fan. And,
Wilco's great, of course.
Yeah. Who else is from the neck of the woods?
Oh, geez. I mean, we could go on for a long time about that. When you put me on the spot like that, I can't think off the top of my head.
No, this is a phenomenon that happens in this room. Everybody's memory just kind of fades on whatever it is I ask them to remember.
Yeah, but I mean, there's Styx was from there. Chicago was from there. The band.
I actually saw. Did I see him play? No, I saw Chicago playing Boston.
Oh,
did I see Boston playing Chicago?
I don't know.
That's
Chicago
a good
question.
Playing Boston. Maybe I was in Kansas. I don't know.
There you go.
So 2005, you moved down here.
Yep.
Solely to play music down here?
Pretty much, yeah.
So what about this area drew you to come and play music down here?
My dad had a coworker who had a brother who was in the music scene. And so that was sort of like, I figured it would be kind of my foot in the door.
Right.
And in many ways it was, but it took a while to get there. I had started going to his open jam session.
Okay.
And he was impressed. At the time, I was more playing guitar. I more play bass now.
Okay.
But at the time, I was more into playing guitar. And he was impressed by me. And I was this young hotshot 22, 23-year-old at the time.
Yeah.
But he didn't really have a spot for me, and this was a blues jam, so it's like mostly going to be a whole bunch of old dudes playing that stuff. So he was like, I don't know where it can fit you. But then eventually his lead guitarist in his band quit, and I joined up with him. And we ended up going on to do quite a few cool things. The two big highlights of that band would probably be after Hurricane Katrina hit, we organized a big benefit for that. And we raised something like $50,000, a lot more than I would think. Wow. A lot more than I would think for, a small local band.
Yeah.
But, anything that helps, right? Drop in the bucket, maybe, but it helps. And
I
then
think it's 40 or 50,000.
Yeah. And then the other big thing was we got to open for Johnny Winter.
Oh,
that
wow.
that was amazing.
That is a big deal, especially in certain niches. I mean, that's yeah, for sure.
And the audience loved it.
Yeah.
We, opening crowds are crowds can be kind of funny about opening bands. Like sometimes they like them, sometimes they don't. These guys loved us. I had my own cheering section at the end of it.
That's awesome. So when did you pick up a guitar?
I was 16 or so when I first started playing.
Was it Dad's guitar or
was it my mom's guitar? Actually,
mom's guitar.
Good call.
Okay, what, acoustic, electric?
Yeah, she had an acoustic, and I'm left-handed, so I was playing her thing. I was playing her stuff backwards for a while.
That's what I don't know if you heard the John Nowicki interview from the Holy Terror, but that's what he does. Is he plays a right-handed guitar strung for a right-hander upside down, so he plays all the chords upside down and backwards.
That's how I started out learning, but then I kind of wanted to do the quote-unquote proper way where the low strings actually on the top or whatever. And so eventually I got my own guitar, and it just went from there.
Okay. And who were your music heroes at 16?
Very early days, I was kind of a one-track mind. I loved REM like a ton.
For sure.
And then after that, it would be like Stevie Ray Vaughan, Led Zeppelin, a lot of the usual classic rock suspects, The Who, Santana.
REM has a very specific guitar sound to it.
They do,
Peter Buck and give me the other name.
Mike Mills.
Mike Mills, thank you.
Yeah.
Both of them, as far as a bass player and a guitar player, there was almost kind of a bluegrassy, folky. Oh yeah. Very kind of tinny guitar.
They were the product of where they came from. They were a small town, college town band, Athens, Georgia.
Yeah.
So they had a little bit of sort of the new wave flair that was going on in there, and then they also had a little bit of the general
Americana,
Americana folk country vibe. Yeah.
I think they'd be thrive today in the whole Jason Isbell drive-by truckers.
Oh, 100%.
Like, I think they were so far before their time. Like
very much so.
That type of music is really hitting.
When you listen to Wilco, you hear the REM influence. You said you like Wilco, yeah,
for sure. So in high school, were you in bands?
In high school, I was actually in more drama classes than anything.
Okay.
Yeah, so I did
So
theater.
the arts have always been your...
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been singing since I was like 7 years old. My first quote-unquote gig was like at a church. I was singing I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus with a big teddy bear in my hand.
Is there a video of that somewhere?
Probably not.
Yeah.
There is audio tape of the first big show I did with I was in a choir called All God's Children, and we performed. I was all of 9 years old at the time. We performed at Chicago's Orchestra Hall.
Oh, wow.
That was really cool.
So after high school, what do you do?
After high school, I kind of took off of school for a while and didn't really do much of anything except play guitar, actually.
Yeah.
And then got into college, started meeting some like-minded people, like-minded musician friends. Which school?
College.
College was University of Illinois Chicago, UIC.
Okay.
And I found a lot of like-minded friends there.
Were there clubs that you could play at up there? Was there, open mics, any of that kind of stuff? I know you said you only played there once, but
yeah, I did a couple of open mics, mostly with my my high school friend JP. We played up in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. I forget the name of the bar now.
I love the Lincoln Park neighborhood.
Oh yeah,
some good Greek food there.
Oh, there's Greek food everywhere.
Yeah.
Played there, and then there was a little place in Pilsen that we did open mics at. So, yeah, we would hit open mics occasionally.
Okay.
And then there was the Elbow Room show. Before the Elbow Room show, when I was still playing with that guy, though, it was just him and me as a duo. I was playing bass, he was playing guitar.
So you'd already made the switch to bass by that point?
I don't know if I'd call it a switch. I kind of played both at the same time.
Yeah.
But he needed a bassist, and I was kind of fiending to try out bass for myself.
Right.
So it was like Memorial Day 02, I finally bought my first bass, and I still own that bass.
What was it?
It's just a Squire with a PJ.
Like a P bass.
Yeah, P bass, jazz bass kind of setup.
Yeah.
And it's in the shop right now. Guitar Repair of Tampa Bay.
Oh, nice.
Plugging them, they're great. But yeah,
you ever do stand up, or is it always?
Oh God, no.
No, yeah.
No, I leave that to the professionals for sure.
Yeah. fretless. That's a whole other world.
Fretless. I'd love to get my hands on a fretless stand-up bass. Whoo-wee.
Yeah.
I mean, for one, it's tough to find a good lefty one.
To find a lefty one, to find a car you can fit it into.
That too.
Find a doorway you can walk it through. I mean, there's any number of things that get in the way.
There's a good chance that thing would stay at home for sure.
Right. So has the music that you've played professionally in these bands, has it always been kind of a bluesy type of thing, or have you played in different genres?
I started out playing blues, and then it became more of a classic rock thing. And then as I progressed, it became kind of everything. Whatever I was needed for, I would play. Whether it was country, blues, rock, pop, it didn't matter. I was
singing too.
Oh yeah,
because you get the pipes, obviously.
Yeah. I've been doing that either leads or backups, either way.
So then, once you come to Florida, kind of run me through the bands that you've been in and the ones that you're playing.
Ooh,
that was a lot.
It's a long list.
I
think the running tally is something like 55 or 56.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's I've played.
You're almost like a session musician.
I kind of consider myself sort of the 6 degrees of separation of like maybe 75% of
all right,
the cover
maybe
scene.
don't go through all of them, but maybe give me some of the bigger ones.
Well, I've actually got a list. I'm not going to run through the whole list, but I already mentioned Unintentional Status. Trial Run was the other band I was in, though that was more of like a recording project with my high school friend JP.
Right.
The first band I was in, I mentioned Johnny Wybars and the Shovelheads was the name of that band. Then there was CFM. CFM was fun because we got to do a rooftop show in honor of the 40th anniversary of the Beatles rooftop show. Yeah. And of course, today being John Lennon's birthday, I figure it's
80, right?
He would have been 80.
That's crazy.
I know. And so we did a rooftop show down at a place called the Cockney Rebel in St. Pete Beach. It's not there anymore.
I remember the Cockney Rebel.
It's like a Thai restaurant now or something like that. So we got up on the roof.
Like all great Irish and English bars, they become Thai restaurants.
Pretty much. Yeah. So we set up on the roof. We had all our gear, and just like the actual rooftop show, we got shut down by the cops.
Oh man!
And they liked it too.
Pulled a permit or called it in, or
that was just it. We didn't have a permit.
Okay.
So they were like, we really like you guys, but we got to shut you down. We're like, okay, fine.
Yeah, beach communities are notoriously shitty and love to call the cops for any reason.
Unfortunately, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But it was still a fun show.
That was CFM?
That was, CFM. And that just stood for Cronin, Fiore, Moondog. Literally just the last names of the three guys in it.
That makes sense.
And then there was Circle Sky. Circle Sky was probably the band that got my name more out there than anything. That was the one where, we did big bombastic classic rock shows, even though we were just a bunch of young bucks in our 20s.
Right.
And we ended up doing things like
what are the numbers that always get the crowd going?
Well, at the time, we started doing, probably around 2009 or so, we started just on a whim doing a whole bunch of Pink Floyd and started doing the entirety of Dark Side of the Moon live.
Oh, wow, that's pretty badass.
That ended up becoming sort of a full-on tribute thing that we did. So like in September of 2010, Pasco put together a thing called Rocktemberfest. And we played all of Dark Side of the Moon to a crowd of probably like 2,500, 3,000 people in Sims Park.
Wow.
That was a great time.
That's amazing. I was talking to Sean O'Brien yesterday, and he was telling me about Have Gun Will Travel doing the Last Waltz, doing like that all in entirety. That sounded pretty amazing. So
it must have been.
Yeah. So anyway,
and the band and that band is perfect for the sound of the band.
100%. Yeah,
they're great. They're cool guys.
So after Circle Sky, then where do you go?
Circle Sky. I mean, there were a few little bands in between. There was Blues Vendetta was just a one-off. Sonic Dali was a one-off. JTM was a one-off. There were a couple others like Hope Darling. I played a few gigs with. They were fun. And Hope Darling is an original band. They've gotten quite a bit of recognition themselves. That's worth to look them up. Then there was Jersey Dirt was just a country band. The next big one probably would have been the Danny Brantley band.
Okay.
I think you know Danny.
I think so. At
least on Facebook.
Yeah.
Brantley was another one that really got my name out there in a big way because prior to Brantley, I was either playing a lot in Pasco or back in the Wide Bars days, it was a very limited scene that I was playing. It was just the blues scene.
Did you ever travel outside of Florida at all for touring or?
Yeah, and that's coming
Later
up.
on.
That's coming up next.
I'm jumping too far ahead.
That's all right. That's all right. But yeah, so I had very limited exposure in in the overall scene.
Right.
So when I joined the Danny Brantley band, he started getting gigs kind of all along the beaches and stuff like that, and that's what really exposed me to the larger cover scene.
Right.
And that's when I started getting gig after gig after gig with all these different fill-in bands. After Danny Brantley would have been Gary Schutt's band. I'm sure you know Gary Schutt.
Yes.
He's pretty big in the area. I played with him for about 10 months in. At the time, it was called Category 3. Now it's Panic Fire. And I also played in his Ozzy tribute. That's where we start going state hopping.
Yeah.
We played like South Carolina, Arkansas. We were New Orleans. New Orleans was a blast.
Tell me some Ozzy songs that you're covering there.
Oh, we're doing.
Was it Black Sabbath and Ozzy?
Yep.
So you're doing the Geezer Butler and the whole shebang.
I was doing as much Geezer and or. Oh my God, I am blanking on his name, and I'm going to knock myself in the head if I don't think about Bob Daisley. That's it.
Yeah.
I was doing all of that.
So I mean, they still had blues-based riffs in their music, even though they kind of took it in a different direction.
Well, everything goes back to the blues.
Yeah.
Or at least everything in rock.
Right. Well, sometimes you listen to like some prog music. I got my Genesis shirt on.
Oh yeah.
It's tough to hear blues and
it's a little bit there. I mean, it's all based around Western music theory of the 1800s anyway.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they were more classically inspired, especially the early stuff.
Right. So the Ozzy band. Well, now what was the name of that band?
That was Diary of an Ozman.
Okay, all right. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities for cool cover band names there.
Oh yeah. And the guy who did Ozzy, Craig, like if he wasn't wearing the Ozzy getup, he would just look like your grandpa.
Right.
And then you put the Ozzy wig on him, you put the glasses on him, and he starts moving around in that Ozzy way, and it's like, whoa.
Yeah, well, and the voice is such that if you can get that kind of nasally register, then
he did.
Yeah.
He absolutely nailed it.
You can nail it. So keep going.
Okay, so
after like the Stephen King of bands, I mean, it's like every 6 months.
I should mention in between a couple of those, I also played a little bit with the Bearded Brothers. The Bearded Brothers are more Pasco, and they're like part of the biker scene and all that.
Right.
They played up in New Hampshire and whatnot. I played for a few months with them off and on. I got to go to South by Southwest with them.
Oh, wow.
That was a blast.
That's badass.
And then let's see. Other tribute bands I played with a Kid Rock tribute for one show, and it was it was super short notice too. Like the guy who booked the bands was like, "Hey, they don't have their bassist. Can you play with them?" And we were all at Daytona for Bike Week, so I was like, "I guess send me a set list." And I had to learn stuff so quickly. It was insane.
Rock cover band Daytona Bike Week. What could go wrong?
Right?
I mean, yeah.
And I got out of it unscathed, so I'm happy with that.
There you go.
Let's see. I went back to Danny Brantley after that, and ever since then, it's been kind of a lot of fill-ins here and there. Let's see. Sweet Spot, Retribution, Hip Witch, Green Light Go. I played a couple of shows with a Rolling Stones tribute called the U.S. Stones.
Okay.
I played a couple of original gigs with this band Compound Melancholy. That's Jason Hobart's project, and that never really completely got off the ground. It was more just his sort of personal project.
Right.
But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And let's see. Ted Lucas and the Misled. I actually ended up recording on an original album of Ted Lucas.
I was going to ask you about recording.
Yeah. So the Ted Lucas album was fun. That happened in, I think it was 2016. I had played an original show with him before in 2014. But then he had been getting the itch to record again. So he called me up, and he called up his drummer friend Ricky Wilcox and Joe Sanders for guitar, and we ended up kind of just piling into this small recording studio owned by Brian Merrill. He lives down in St. Pete, and he's got a little backyard studio. He just calls it Studio B.
Right.
Really cool setup. So we piled on in there. I think we recorded like 6 songs one day, 4 songs the next. Literally just bang through them, 2 takes, 3 takes, and done.
Right.
And then I think I went back to re-record maybe 2 songs. And then Ted redid the vocals, Ted redid the guitars, Joe came in to do a few solos, and that was it. It was done. It was like a super fast process. And the resulting album is King of Reverse, which is on Spotify now.
That's bad. I think you sent me, that was
I
one
sent you
was-
the link, yeah.
That's awesome. So the bands, are you playing at all right now, or are you completely shut down? I mean, have you started?
It was kind of a tough call to make. Once the pandemic started hitting, obviously things got canceled and I had no control over that.
Were you making a living off of playing?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Okay.
It was literally my only job for about almost 10 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was full time. I was hanging in there and doing really, really well actually. But then of course the pandemic hit and that kind of put a damper on everything. My last gig was March 15th and I haven't played since then.
How's that been?
It's been weird. It's been very weird. Going out anywhere is sort of a gamble, and I just didn't want to take the chance. Eventually what happened, because I mean, things got canceled because of shutdowns and stuff like that. But then when things started opening back up, like right around Memorial Day or so, I was kind of put in this position of, well, do I play any new gigs or don't I play? And the biggest thing was I have family at home that are immune compromised.
Right.
So I decided I'm not going to chance it. I'm going to stay home and keep them safe, even though it's going to, cost me something in my livelihood.
Right.
But,
the other part about it too is, I mean, there's the health factor of it, but, what does a concert look like post pandemic? Like, limiting the number of people, distancing, or you have a merch table, what all these things.
That's a very good question. Actually, I'm going to find out tomorrow.
Oh, well, there you go.
Because I'll be playing my first gig in almost 7 months tomorrow over in Daytona.
Oh, really?
I'll be playing with an Elton John tribute called The Rocket Man Show.
Nice.
Yeah, and they're doing limited seating. I think the seats are going to be spaced out accordingly. So it'll be a socially distant show, but it's still going to be a full-on concert.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's got to be kind of part of the wave of the future of live music for at least a little bit.
At least a little while, yeah.
But with the heavier stuff, the metal and the punk and all that stuff, I mean,
you can't mosh anymore.
Well, right. So what does that look like?
Who knows, man? This is gonna change things for sure. We just don't know how yet. And maybe when the vaccine comes, it'll be a little bit easier. It's hard to say right now. Everything's so up in the air.
Now, do you write music too, or?
I do a little bit. What I say on my social media is that I'm a bassist, guitarist, singer, attempted drummer, occasional songwriter, producer, and nerd.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're a Renaissance man. So
I try to be.
So where have you devoted your energy during the pandemic, if not playing live?
Mostly coming back to projects that have been kind of on the back burner for too long. So like in the case of Danny Brantley's another one who has an original album. I gave you the link for that.
Yeah.
That's on Spotify too. That's called Born on New Year's Eve. But we have a second album in the works. I've got multi-tracks just sitting on my computer. So I've been working on that. I've been getting back to mixing those and saying, hey, we need to add this. And so people have been, sending me tracks remotely and stuff like that.
Right.
So I've been doing a little bit of that, doing old remixing projects that I wanted to do for a long time. Mostly that. And then I also sent you a couple of YouTube links. If you go to Danny Brantley Band's YouTube page, we did a couple of quarantine covers recently.
Oh, wow.
And that was a lot of fun.
That's cool.
I think we did John Mayer's Slow Dancing in a Burning Room.
Yeah.
And then for a contest via this group called Cover Nation, we covered Coldplay's Yellow.
Okay.
So that was cool.
That's pretty badass. So what type of music are you listening to these days? Are you all over the place? Or are you?
I've always been all over the place. Yeah, I listen to everything. I mean, I'm looking around in your room here and I'm just like, I like that. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. I like that.
What does that inform what you want to play, like what you're listening to, or are you able to kind of your left and your right hand do whatever?
When it comes to playing in cover bands and stuff like that, like I did last year I did a week I was filling in for their usual bassist with this band called Mixed Signal, and they're very much it's female fronted pop band.
Right.
They do a lot of modern pop covers. They did like Dua Lipa and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
So that's not stuff I would normally listen to.
Right.
I appreciate it, but it's not like my wheelhouse.
Right.
So I still listen to that. I still appreciate it. But what I like and what I really get into, it's not necessarily stuff that plays well on the beaches.
Yeah.
So
who are some of your bass player heroes?
Oh, how long do you have?
Give me 3 or 4 or 5.
Right off the top of my head, Mike Mills, of course, again, REM.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney for sure.
Yeah.
Both for his bass playing skills and his singing skills, and then of course songwriting. Certainly Geddy Lee is up there. Rocco Prestia, who we just lost. What was it? A little over a week ago now. Who else? Pretty much the names you would expect in classic rock, like John Entwistle, Chris Squire.
Yeah.
Robert DeLeo was a huge one from Stone Temple Pilots.
Yeah.
Love him.
Yeah.
James Jamerson, certainly.
There's been this whole a certain age of musical artists that come through here. All of them learn to play, and the ones that learn to play bass from Green Day. And
Mike Dirnt. Yep.
So,
No, Mike Dirnt's great too. That whole Dookie album, I'll play along to that all day. That's great stuff.
Yeah. I'm a big Mike Watt fan.
Mike Watt's great. Yes, the Minutemen. Yeah.
Yeah. He just kind of a force of nature. You know?
He's a weird dude, but he's cool. He's
not only that, but he's writing his music around a bass. Like very rarely is the person writing the song or arranging the song the bass player.
Right.
They're always kind of the holding it down in the back, and so it's always interesting to see kind of that perspective on music. And that's
kind of why I get into the more frontman bassists, like your Geddy Lees and your Paul McCartneys and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or Sting, or stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. Sting, that's interesting. He's a bass player, and I never consider him as such.
I mean, if you dig through some of that Police stuff, it's heavily reggae inspired, but it's also its own thing too.
I dig the Police. I'm a big Police fan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't think they get their due. I mean, they did for a while, but I guess it's because they've kind of
they tend to ebb and flow in the consciousness of the public.
Well, Copeland's always the one who gets the most fanfare for being a gifted musician.
And and the wild man drummer.
Right.
But Andy Summers is not nearly as recognized as he should be for his guitar playing.
Yeah.
And Sting, I mean, amazing songwriter,
vocally, just all of it. So you got a show booked for tomorrow in Daytona.
I do.
What other shows do you have booked?
The only other show I have booked this year is just this private function. Also, funny enough, with the Danny Brantley Band, which that band technically hasn't played together since New Year's Eve 2017.
Do you guys practice at all, or do you just walk in and you know what you're playing and that's it?
For a time, we just walked in and played.
Yeah.
But every now and then we would rehearse and get together, especially if we wanted to go over some kind of new song.
Yeah.
I think we're going to end up doing maybe one rehearsal for this, kind of just a refresher course.
Right.
But a lot of what we play is not super complicated. We're not trying to do, all of Genesis Foxtrot or anything like that. Yeah. So we usually can just sort of roll in and play the gig and roll out.
Yeah. Now, do you have kids?
I don't. No.
Okay. So, aside from music, what else is you mentioned nerd and all this other stuff? I see you got your Star Wars.
I've got my Star Wars. Yeah. Is it obvious? I'm a huge Star Wars nerd, of course. Yeah, I love that. And I know people have mixed feelings about the sequels. I like the sequels for what they are.
You got to check out my buddy's band. His current band is Wolfface, but he's got a hardcore band from early 2000s called Next Season, and they're a Star Wars inspired hardcore band.
Ooh, I like it already.
Yeah, you got to check it out. They're on Bandcamp. It's pretty cool.
Okay, cool. What was it again? Name?
Next Season.
Next Season. Okay.
Yeah. So, well, I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, man.
This has been awesome. So, you mentioned it a little bit, but where can people find some of your music?
So you
mentioned YouTube.
And very first trial run album, or that technically the only trial run album, was something I made back in 2009 with my buddy JP. Technically, it was like a 9-year process.
Oh my God.
Well, what happened was, I mean, we kind of had our own lives. Like we wanted to get together and we wanted to jam, and we wanted to play. And our early songwriting ideas were, as they tend to be when you're starting to write stuff, it doesn't come out that great, or it comes out too derivative.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we wrote early stuff, but we never kept any of that stuff. And then a couple years later, we wrote some new stuff. And by 2005, we recorded kind of a majority of it. But at that point, I had moved to Florida and he had moved to Michigan.
Okay.
So we kind of had to finish the album from a distance.
Remotely, yeah.
So it took a while, and then finally I got the mixing process done, and we finished it in 2009. Actually, it'll be almost exactly 11 years. I think it's on the 13th October 13th is when we released it. So it'll be almost exactly 11 years in a few days here.
Wow.
That's on Spotify. It's on YouTube. It's called The Rooftop Garage.
Okay.
It's mostly acoustic, instrumental. Not like amazing stuff, but I was proud of it.
Proud of it, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's I played bass on the Danny Brantley album Born on New Year's Eve, also on Spotify. I played bass on that. I played a guitar solo on one track, a harmonica solo on one track, and I did all the mixing on that. And then there's Ted Lucas' King of Reverse. That was released, I think, 2 years ago.
Right.
Something like that. And that's also on Spotify, on YouTube, pretty much anywhere you can stream music.
What's the event you're playing tomorrow?
It's just I guess it's just some sort of either Columbus Day weekend thing or
I was playing Daytona.
Well, the only time I played Daytona previously was that was the only time, and that was Biketoberfest, and that was kind of its own thing because during Biketoberfest, a lot of what happens is just in the bars.
Yeah.
So like at the time I was playing with the Ozzy tribute at Boot Hill Saloon. And I forget where the Kid Rock tribute was, but it was on a bigger stage and it was further over, kind of in the parking lot area of whatever bar that was. So, and that's just a lot of, people coming in and out, checking it out, hanging out, screaming. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, playing a bikers, it seems like that would be an interesting gig.
That was how I started, though.
Yeah,
that's the funny thing. Like,
I was thinking of the chicken wire fence in front of the stage. And I know that's the movies, but that's kind of the.
There was a place I played in Palmetto, probably 2005, 2006, called Peggy's Corral. It has that vibe for sure. They don't actually have the chicken wire, but you can picture it.
They
pretty
probably
easily.
had it at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, do you book your own stuff, or how does that work? Do you just get called up from bands and say, "Hey, we got a gig. Do you want to play?"
Mostly, I get called up on the only thing I've ever booked for myself would be like solo shows, solo acoustic shows.
Okay.
But everything else, usually someone else handles the booking, and I just sort of show up and play.
Yeah. Well, how are the live venues doing up your way in Newport Richey? Are a lot of them closing down? Are they kind of fighting for their life like we?
They're struggling for sure. A lot of them. There was one place it used to be called the Carl Reef. And it was just sort of
the Carl Reef.
Carl Reef, Karl, named after the guy who owned it. So it was like a little spin on that. But it used to be called that, and it was just sort of your local smoky. But it was like it was pretty much the quote unquote premier club of Newport Richey.
Right.
And so
high praise. That's
well, just because it was the biggest and most frequented, and it would get the best bands, stuff like that. But they recently changed owners, and they changed over to being non-smoking, number one, and having food, number two. And this was all before the pandemic.
Well, they got they got in on the food part of that because that kept them open
just in time. Yeah. So that was a smart move for them. And a lot of places, fortunately, a lot of places who were doing live music were kind of this bar/restaurants anyway.
Right.
So they were still able to kind of stay alive by doing the whole takeout serving food thing.
Right.
But it's obviously a struggle anyway.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where, like you said, they're hanging on by a thread, or they're not necessarily hanging on by a thread, but they're just skating by.
Well, if there's an upside to any of this, I've said it a bunch of times with other guests on the show, but I'm hoping that this pushes people to support live music, to pay more attention to live music, because a lot of the national acts are not going to be touring for quite some time. So if you want to go see live music, it's going to be a local band.
It's pretty much going to be your only option.
And so hopefully that's kind of an annuity for local bands and local.
It could be a blessing in disguise.
Right.
6 months, a year from now, it could end up being kind of a new revolution.
Yeah.
If you're trying to find an upside for it, there's opportunity there.
Right.
I mean, when you think about all of the big bands, all the national acts, international acts that came before, they all started pretty much the same. They started playing local dive bars as cover bands. Beatles did that. Metallica did that. A lot of bands did that.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned Squire P bass was your first one. What do you play mostly these days?
These days, I took the plunge and bought a special custom one from a company based out of Poland called Maruszczyk.
Okay.
I love this bass. It's basically a 5-string jazz bass, but on steroids.
Okay.
And it's just, it can play pretty much anything. I featured it in the Danny Brantley YouTube video that I did for Yellow.
Yeah.
The thing sounds monstrous on that.
Yeah. So are you picking up a guitar anymore, or is it pretty much?
Oh yeah. I still noodle around on guitar, and especially now that, unfortunately, we have to talk about Eddie Van Halen. He passed away. What was it? 3 days ago. Yeah. Of course, I am not Eddie Van Halen. No one can be Eddie Van Halen, but I can still attempt some of his riffs.
Well, his type of playing is not as popular these days as it was at the height of his music, but it's undeniable. I was watching a video started getting circulated this morning of when he was on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And he and G.E. Smith, who used to lead the Saturday Night Live band, playing together.
I know the clips you're talking about. Yeah.
Just effortless. Just
like that was the one thing about Eddie, was his playing was always so
just
smooth.
Had that smile on. He always had that smile on his face.
Yep.
It just seemed so easy, and the hammer-ons and the finger tapping and all this other stuff. You don't get quite as much of that in music now as you used to. But they unfairly, I think, get roped in with hair metal or hair rock or whatever, and I don't think that they were.
Well, they were kind of the progenitors of that style,
but there was much more legitimacy in every aspect of it: the instrument playing, the songwriting, the lyrics, and all of that.
The biggest thing was the songwriting. Eddie had hooks for days.
He had hooks for days. The drums were badass.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Michael Anthony's voice over top of David Lee Roth's voice. I mean, as far as a showman, I mean, Diamond,
can't beat that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were almost like not like a vaudeville, but they almost had like a.
Well, Dave definitely added a bit of a vaudeville element to it.
Yeah.
And the rest of it was just the thing I constantly see in whether it's Rolling Stone or any other kind of music magazine is heavy metal with a smile.
Well, so this I posted the day that it happened. Like, I try to think of who is a fun rock band these days, like a legitimate fun rock band, and you have to dig for a little bit.
You really do.
Like, I don't know well, I mean, first off, the radio, the airwaves, and the commercial scene is not populated by.
It's mostly ignoring rock music these days.
Completely.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. Even 97.1, they flipped it. They used to play a lot of alternative rock.
So maybe Miley Cyrus is the new Van Halen or whatever, but.
But yeah, it's all gone either alt pop or straight pop or hard rock, and there's not really much of an in between.
Is Foo Fighters. That's the only one that I can kind of land on, and I dig the Foo Fighters, but they're not Van Halen.
Oh no.
Yeah, and so I wonder, do you think there's ever a sea change that might take over front and center again?
It's always possible.
Yeah.
It's always possible.
Yeah.
I mean, and especially now that Eddie's passed on, I think what's and this happens anytime anyone passes on, is people are going to start recognizing the greatness for what it was.
Yeah.
You were unfortunately kind of stuck in this world of context when you have someone that's alive, and you look like Motley Crue, for example.
Yeah.
Like, everyone knows their story and they're kind of stuck in their own time.
Right.
But once people start passing away, a lot of those myths and stories, they get told.
You remember the good stuff, and the bad stuff kind of sheds off.
Right. And the goofy stuff tends to get forgotten, and you're able to look a little more purely at the music.
Right.
And I think that's what's going to happen with Van Halen, whether it's now or a few months down the line, and people are going to start to realize and understand where Eddie and the rest of them were coming from.
Right.
And I think you might end up seeing a sort of a wave of inspiration from that.
Well, I hope so. I mean, it's the good guitar driven instrument music is out there. You just got to work a little bit harder to get to it than
like locally here. A couple of the bands I played with, guitarists were heavily inspired by Van Halen.
Yeah.
Heavily. Yeah. Gary Schutt, certainly hugely inspired by Van Halen. Matter of fact, he just early released a track that he's going to be putting on his new album probably 2 days ago or something like that. And it's very early 90s era Van Halen. Okay. Like, it's got that
OU812 or
yeah, a little
Sammy Hagar, yeah.
Yeah.
Was 5150 the first
5150 was the first Hagar. Yeah. That was 85, 86, something like that. 86, I think.
Because it's around Hagar that keyboards start coming into Van Halen.
Yeah, I mean, 1984 was the first heavily keyboard-driven album. That was the last Roth album.
Yeah.
Before Different Kind of Truth, obviously. But yeah, then
it's just occurring to me how many albums they have that have numbers in the title.
There was 1984, 5150, OU 812.
Yeah.
And then of course, Van Halen 2, Van Halen 3.
Yeah. Well, I was last night I woke up in the middle of the night and I don't know why it occurred to me, but I was thinking Van Halen is one of the only bands that is named after band members that isn't the leader of the band.
I saw that post. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because if you read the answers, some people got what I was asking. Other people did it like, everybody's Winger. I was like, Winger was the singer of the band.
Right. Kip Winger. Yeah. Come on, man.
Yeah. But, and then Fleetwood Mac and
Fleetwood Mac makes sense.
I can follow you with Fleetwood Mac.
Or Montrose, which funny enough, Sammy Hagar again.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, it's rare. It's not.
It doesn't happen often.
Yeah.
No.
Anyway, well, thank you so much for coming by. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, you too, man.
Your music's great.
Thank you.
Hopefully everything gets back up and moving, and hopefully better than ever with you.
When everything starts coming back to a little more of a sense of normalcy, I will be ready. Bass strapped on me. I'll be ready to scream and rumble.
Well, this won't get released before your show tomorrow, so telling people to go see you tomorrow, it will be in vain. But
that's all right.
But if people are likely going to come see you, what are the bands that they're going to see you in?
It's either going to be More Is More, which is Dave Erasmo's band, or it's going to be Phoenix, which is fronted by an absolute banshee of a singer named Eileen Humphrey. She's incredible.
Okay.
So it's going to be one of those two, most likely.
All right. Well, keep your eyes out for More Is More on Phoenix.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you.
All right.